The United States Surgeon General calls on Congress to require warning labels on social media platforms. WIFR reporter Alyssa Kelly talks with local mental health experts about the possible health warning.
The Surgeon General says that social media is a contributing factor in the mental health crisis among young people in our country.
Go touch grass.
Similar to those mandatory on cigarette boxes, the United States Surgeon General says it is time to require warning labels on social media platforms.
I think my take on what the Surgeon General is doing is saying that there is side effects of what's happening. There's an impact of what's happening.
In a statement, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy says a Surgeon General's warning label, which requires congressional action, would regularly remind parents and adolescents that social media has not been proved safe.
The genie is out of the bottle at this point. We can't walk back the usage that people are having on their phones. What we can do is promote what's called internet literacy, meaning educating people on that we need to not just trust everything we see in a 10-second clip, that we need to be more educated in terms of the harmful effects.
Warning labels were placed on tobacco products 50 years ago. Studies since then show those warnings did increase awareness and change behaviors in some people. According to Pew Research Center, 95% of teens use a social media platform. More than a third use it almost constantly. But experts say safety on social media must start somewhere and feel it should begin in the home.
Sometimes there's little kids, vulnerable kids, and they don't really know what they're getting into. I feel like kids my age wouldn't really notice. I feel like they'd just be continue and just not pay attention to it at all.
The Surgeon General also recommended that companies share all their data on health effects with independent scientists and the public.
Thank you, Alyssa. Experts encourage schools and parents to create phone-free times to help create better habits.